Hi, everyone.
Hi, guys. Good to see you. James, you're muted. All right, but so we have 15 minutes, so we were probably thinking of doing something a bit chronological for sake of the argument, going back to some RareAF stories. And we want to start with RareAF 1? Judy?
Well, yes, I mean, that's kind of like the seminal event where we all got together for the first time. And by we all, I mean, the few platforms at the time in the beginning of 2018, which were identified actually by Joe Looney, who is, as we call him, the grandfather of crypto art. Of the platforms that were doing NFTs, which at the time weren't even called NFTs yet. We were still discussing whether to call it crypto art or rare art or blockchain art. But this festival started with a tweet by Joe, who identified, he found the CryptoPunks, he found Dada, he found the Rare Art Labs guys, and he sent a tweet saying, we should have a festival, we should meet. And the Rare Art Labs guys actually took it upon themselves to organize this. What I love about this, it was completely almost serendipitous. And in the space of a month, by January 13 of 2018, we had a festival. And it really was, I think, that where the community started and coalesced, at least here in New York. We actually didn't really know anyone very well. The only people we knew, that Beatrice and I, were John and Matt from CryptoPunks, because they had helped us with their smart contract and with their open source code. They were the inspiration for our Crips and Weirdos, just as the Rare Peppers were the inspiration also in terms of the aesthetic. And so we decided, well, we don't really know anyone. So we had a little cocktail party before the event so that we could all hang out before actually speaking on a panel and at least get to bond. And I think that was one of the greatest ideas I ever had, because we really got to know each other before we got to speak on a stage. And I think from there, a lot of things happened in terms of community. Like it was like this kind of feeling of we can help each other, we can champion each other, we can support each other, was there from the very beginning. And I think it still is around to this day. Awesome. Do I have any seconds left? Probably not, but take it away.
I don't know. I don't know. Were you, James, at RareAF 1? I was not. I went with.
I was there. I remember being blown away, just walking into a pack of people who were all just like fervent. It was like this energy of curiosity and so much opportunity. The crowd was wild. It was like packed to the brim, and I made some great friends that day. That's how I got into the art project, #ArtProject Telegram group. I hadn't really used Telegram prior to that experience and started using it more and more and learned a lot from that community. And that was crucial in sort of my experience learning about crypto art. I didn't know anything, but the journey has been everything.
And then you decided to organize RareAF 2.
Well, we heard it couldn't happen as planned. So we repurposed a group which started to organize an NFT hackathon in conjunction with ETH New York. So that group kind of adopted the RareAF brand, and we did a logo design contest, which was impossible to decide the victor. But we ended up choosing Mattia Catini, who created this font and a logo for this event, and it's now enshrined with the NFT After Effects. So wanted to give that a shout out. And then Cynthia Gayton made that.
I have it too, right here in front of me.
So I do actually want to share let's see, Chrome. I'll show my entire screen. I want to show you a few pictures from that RareAF 2, because that's something I know personally. I was not at the first one, so we have to organize the next one. So So we did organize it in Bushwick at the Bushwick Generator in May 2019. And guys, like, chip in anytime something pops up on the picture. But I thought that was nice to see a few people. That's my daughter, who created the creative station upstairs, where there was a lot of artists who exhibited. A lot of, you can see the RareAF books, like different screens. There was Johnny Dollar. That was super rare corner, as you can see. A little thing with the Coldie work, Hakata, Xcopy and the likes. Same, that's our Theo right here being creative. That was Bea downstairs. So there was like a full day of panels. Matt and John were here. We had the Crypto Kaiju little people at the pizzeria. My daughter was making a lot of business that day. Like more panels upstairs, impromptu discussions. CryptoPunks with Sam's painted CryptoPunks. Again, the upstairs, you can see like Martin's cloud, augmented reality prints. And of course, Matt was there, and Judy and John. It's really where you see it's a small family. So it's.
I think this festival, so it was really kind of a real community feeling where everyone, like that. By that time, there were more platforms. There's Simona. There were, and the people from Baker's Place came from LA. We organized the art show upstairs where we had platforms and individual artists who submitted art, and there was an auction, but it really was the community. It was really a very cool, lovely event, and there we are at the end. Everybody having dinner, so cool. Yeah.
I remember Jonathan's song of the day, which said, "The Ferris wheel is the proof of love," and I've been using the Ferris wheel emoji ever since, just thinking about how many friends and actually family that I gained that day, and the experience overall was just life-changing. But thanks for sharing that.
You were mostly like last year you organized it online, so maybe you can tell a bit more about that. I know I was driving, so in my phone I was like I could not find a picture of that online. But tell us.
Well, you can go learn more about what we did at RareAF.world, but as everyone knows, last year brought some challenges. We had plans to do an IRL event at a gallery in Manhattan provided by the Portion team, which was going to be cool, but we couldn't do it. So we had to pivot and organize a virtual event. But the community rallied again to get almost 80 speakers and nearly 100 virtual exhibits on this website. You can go check it out. And we did talks nonstop for about 3 or 4 days.
I remember you were exhausted.
Yes, it was a long, journey as well. It just felt like months in a few days, but we learned a lot, and that was one of the first kind of experiences I had with organizing a virtual event, and it was definitely eye-opening to new possibilities for the metaverse and kind of what happens next. So I'm excited about this year. We're kind of thinking outside the box. We're doing a choose your own adventure style event. So there's going to be a low-key gathering in a park in New York City. Still deciding which park.
Oh, please tell us when. Don't forget to say when. Okay.
Yes, so it's coming up. Every year we're going to be doing RareAF in May. So if you have any ideas for a festival of your own or some kind of exhibit, or you want to talk, you want to share your creativity, then do it anytime, but just know we're going to be getting together every May, and I want to commit to that specifically. But this year I want to emerge from the quarantine. I'll be vaccinated by then, so anyone who feels safe can join us in the park. And I want to show up in Central Park, maybe shout and decentralize the park, or we can do something a little bit more.
We try to not get arrested.
The Central Park, that would be cool.
Yeah, just an idea. But no, it's very loose. If you have ideas and you want to create and coordinate, you can find more on Twitter. Follow us, and there'll be some plans tweeted there. And we have a Telegram group. And obviously, you guys are doing awesome stuff. I want to hear more about what you're doing so people can join and get involved.
Yeah, there's still a lot of people in New York, so for those who are local, that's going to be good. I will route for Prospect Park in Brooklyn, but that's me. And no, I mean it's been a great continuity, so it's a good thing you took it over, and what I really like is that it's not it's a community festival, so it's not like led by a corporation, a big name in the field. It's really a gathering, and very every year it's like amazing ideas, new people you meet. Like it's very good use of any person involved in NFTs, and highly recommend, because it's going to be great again this year. So yeah.
No, it's exciting, and also I agree with Fanny that as we've seen, the NFTs are becoming a household word, and soon to be co-opted, or already co-opted by the mainstream and celebrities and God knows what. So it's important, I think, to keep the community spirit alive, and I think James is really your heart is in that place. So
it doesn't happen without everyone. So I really can't say that enough, because it's a challenge every year convincing people that I'm not in charge. So believe me.
But like now, I think with time, I think it'll be easier, and also the pandemic, I think, has helped to maybe like people organize in a different way. So now, hopefully, more people will be willing to, like you say, take responsibility for something and do it, and somehow work it out in a way that not everything falls on you, right?
I'm a little burnt out from virtual events in general, so I want to do this IRL experience, but I would love to see RareAFs, plural, happening all over, in cities around the world. I think that would be awesome. But of course, that takes a lot of work.
What's the date? May 15th?
May 15th and 16th.
But I love the idea of meeting in person, like in a park, even with mask, whatever. But I miss you so much, everyone, that I think it would be so nice to be there.
Yeah. I can't wait.
And we can stream it or film it for anyone who is outside of New York.
All right. Well, I think, look at us. We covered like 4 events in like 15 minutes. So.
Yeah.
It's sort of it's a well-known problem or issue or thing in the space is now you have this ability for an object to exist digitally. You can say that a digital thing has entityness, it has aura. And if you're from the art world, this concept of aura is very classic, a Walter Benjamin thing. It's this sense of like nounness, that now this thing can be an object, and it has a consistent set of identity, kind of like the ship of Theseus. And that's really, really interesting. But what occurs really quickly is we find that the meaningfulness of any object, both physical and digital, is derived almost entirely from the context that it lives in, the story that it lives in, the narrative that it lives in, and importantly, the space that it lives in, and how that contributes to its meaningness as well. And so that's why I think this book from 1964, Notes on the Synthesis of Form from Christopher Alexander, is a seminal classic text from God knows how long ago, 80 years now. Is exactly like it's written like you're trying to build a website today, and it's all based on physical architecture and the design of physical space. But the more abstract form, the more abstract problem that Christopher Alexander is trying to solve or to describe is you have a problem, and it mostly involves how people interact, but you have a problem. How do you design a solution to fit it? And this is like very design thinking, which is nothing new to us today, but was kind of a big deal in the past. And so in the book, he goes on to describe like, hey, this is how I think about design. You have a problem, which he calls the context. And you have this definition of the problem is the context. And then you have a form, which is a solution that fits that context. And he speaks about design as the process of finding form and context fit. Really straightforward when you think about it. And I think that's useful for designing digital spaces, because one of the premises in the book is in architecture, he was saying, here, I'll quote, the sort of two problem statements that he presents in the book for architecture is that, hey, the substrate, the base, this context of the world we live in is changing so rapidly that this generational iterative approach to adapting how we live, and he's speaking specifically to houses and architecture space, this generational iteration can no longer sufficiently adapt in time, right? The process of learning from those who came before you, changing something, waiting to see what happens, is too slow for this rapidly changing world. And then two is that the problems become so complex that no one person can fully understand the problem, the context. And he then goes on to provide this framework and this sort of process for breaking down problems into little modular problems, and then solving those modular contexts, producing a form, and then recombining, sort of unwinding that stack to arrive at a shared or a compiled form. And this is all very abstract, and I'll get into like a very specific example, but I want to draw parallels to the medium shift of how humans are interacting in the physical space to how, especially the last year, humans had to interact in the digital space. And the similarity is that, hey, we're still human, we still want to interact. These base desires are the same. The medium by which we do that has suddenly shifted. And this shift was inevitable, right? It's becoming more digital by the day. COVID is just like this accelerant. And this was really prevalent the first few days or the first few weeks of quarantine when everything went digital. And it's like, hey, we have this concept, this physical experience. In our case, we were looking, pre-COVID, AJ and I were working on this problem of like the gallery experience. Like you go to an art gallery. What is the digital equivalent of that? And it's worth specifying the difference between this idea of transposition, this rebuilding brick by digital brick of an experience, and the translation, which is much more Christopher Alexander, where you break down this problem into its sort of constituent parts, into a modular problem, and then solve that in abstract, and then combine those abstract solutions into a concrete solution. And so we sort of applied this thinking to the space of digital gallery. And so let's go deep into that. Here I have a list, so I don't forget them all. And it's worth noting that in the book, the connection between a defined context of like, hey, we want humans to be able to feel the presence of other humans, and the form, what that solution is. Maybe it's avatars that are three-dimensionally next to each other, or maybe it's Figma cursors with a name around it, or maybe it's something even more digitally native, like a little blur over here when someone's near you or something like that. Those two things, when they are combined together, and the map between them, problem to solution, is called a pattern. And so if you want to get more into Christopher Alexander, go into like a pattern language is his, there's a whole series, there's like 8 books in the series. But that's the idea, is that it's a diagram or a pattern that describes a solution to a context. And so, for example, in the gallery example, we have this idea of, okay, you have an art gallery. Instead of recreating that brick by digital brick, think three-dimensional walls with art on the wall, with avatars that you move with your keyboard, all very like skeuomorphic. And it works because it relies on things that we already understand, but it's not necessarily digitally native. It's not the most optimal solution. And to give weight to that claim is, for example, when iOS was first created, you have this like new medium of a touch screen. Nobody knows how to use it. And so the first thing they do as designers is rely on things we already know, which are this very physical nature of how to interact with something. So for example, the Notes app had scripty font and a page turning animation and a crumple sound as it went into a wastebasket, like all very physical metaphors. And those were required for people to understand how to use this new medium. But what we found is over the years, say 10 of them, we've approached a more ideal version of digital computing where the same problems are still being solved, right? You can still take a note and trash it. You can still like go from one note to another. But instead of relying on these physical metaphors, we found more digitally native ones, like, for example, using a sans serif font, which is easier on the eyes on a digital screen. You can still trash things, but instead of a crumple, it's sort of like a squeeze magic thing in the case. You like, instead of like very high shadows, you have still the concept of a z-index. Things can be on top of each other, but that's much more digitally native. Like there's a bit of a shadow because that's useful for us to cue in on z-indexes, but it's not the heaviness of like a physical paper texture over another thing. And so this sort of happens on any medium shift, I think. And that's one example. And so to reapply that learning here, I'm like, okay, we have a digital gallery. The obvious answer is to make it three-dimensional, give people an avatar, have them walk around, proximity, audio, whatever. And that works because it solves the same problem. Of course it works because, you know, it worked in real life. You recreate real life, it still kind of works. But the more optimal solution is going to involve sort of designing from first principles. What are the aspects of going to an art gallery that are useful? And so we can kind of break those down. One is, I think, the curated narrative, this idea of following a storyline. However, one thing that's really cool about an art gallery is that you get to peel off and go do your own thing whenever you want. And so it's this sort of choice, this sort of like spontaneity of decision-making where it's like, hey, there's a curator, there's this way of doing this thing, but I can also just go do my own thing. And so that's like an interesting property. And you get that kind of for free with 3D space. But if you don't necessarily require the concept of 3D space, which I don't think you do, then you must solve this problem slightly differently. So how do you create spontaneity along a narrated path? So that's one sort of base context. Then you have other aspects of a gallery that are really interesting, like event tickets. Is it important that you pay to enter? Maybe it is, maybe it's not. Is it important that you can take your ticket stub and keep it as a piece of memorabilia? Maybe, maybe not. What about entrance fees and attendance limits? Like, is an attendance limit a feature or a bug of physical space? And you kind of think about this problem. It's like, okay, cool. Well, now we have digital space. Nothing is scarce by default. Physical scarcity exists because there are walls around the building, fire codes, all of that. Time is scarce because you know, opening and closing hours, it's in a specific space. So if you're going to the Met, you have to be in New York. You can't go to the Met anywhere else. But now we have a digital medium where it's universally acceptable, accessible any time of the year, any time of day, anywhere in the world. Is that a feature? Is that a bug? And if it's a feature, how do you lean into that? And if it's a bug, how do you reintroduce, different aspects of the experience such that you get what you want. And so it's worth noting that all of these are, hyper specific to your context. It's like there's no one solution. Another aspect is this sense of magic space in like a gallery. How do you create this, social norm of quietude and introspection, or looking at a piece of art and caring about it? How do you do that online, right? You have this, it's the web. You can go anywhere, anytime. With a Command T, you're on a different planet, right? Like, how do you, and is that a feature of a gallery? And if it is, how do you replicate that online without, there's no digital equivalent of that, so it's kind of hard to transpose. And so like one example is using the medium. Okay, make this tab full screen, and then if you close it, you've sort of indicated that you're not focusing on this thing anymore. Now you have this digitally native sense of, okay, cool, this person's not interested, maybe kick them out of the gallery, let them go do something else, right? Like that kind of translation. You have this sort of social norm stuff where it's like, how do you craft a social norm? And then the social layer, of course, is like, I want to go to a gallery with my friends. I want to talk to my friends. And then also there's this idea of serendipity of like, I'm there for the public. I'm at an opening. I want to meet other people. How do you do that digitally, naturally and natively? And so I think the short-term solutions that we jump to, certainly work. And I guess to the point of digital event, what's that called? Burnout, that they were mentioning in the last panel. It's like these things work, but they don't work super well. And I feel like there's a more natural expression of these, a more natural expression to solve these problems. And it will be reliant on, we're humans, we're spatial creatures. We live in a three-dimensional world. We understand gravity. We understand all of these things, and it will be based off that. You can look at spatial software, for example, but it won't necessarily be tied. All of these assumptions we make around how the real world is can be cast away in digital space. And so there's this, almost too much freedom associated with this problem space. And so I think a really helpful way to design for that is to break down your context into subcontexts, this like first principles thinking, solve it abstractly. So like, what are the, I want to interact with other humans. How do I want to do that? There's chat, there's audio, there's proximity, there's video, there's poking people on Facebook. There's so many different mediums and forms by which you can solve that context. And you want to be able to combine those patterns into a sort of unique compiled form that solves your problem. And so, yeah, we kind of applied that to SoftSpot and the art gallery problem. I think I'm almost done with time. But yeah, and so my take is that we're in this new medium phase of bringing a lot of social interaction to the digital space. And the reason I think that's relevant here is because, again, digital objects require this context to be meaningful. A Fortnite skin without the game Fortnite doesn't make any sense. Narrative is everything, especially when it comes to this digital good that may not have any innate utility, right? If you think about value of a digital thing as external value, what someone else will pay for it, internal value, like what it means to me, and this like innate value of utility, a lot of digital things, especially in the case of art, won't necessarily have any utility. And so it really just highlights how important the narrative and the storytelling and the broader context that it lives in, how important that is. And so, yeah, I think this is just a call to action to think about these problems from first principles and design, novel solutions. And I think it would be cool if we had a sort of pattern language, to use Christopher Alexander's terms, of digital space, such that, hey, when we're trying to synthesize form, when we're trying to create an app, a digital world, just a website, a wallet, when we're trying to create that, what are the things we want to solve for, and what are the patterns we can use to solve it in ways that are translatory and translate meaning rather than transposing or copying. Yeah, so that is my manifesto, so to speak, of how to think about designing digital space. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Matt Condon. Man, back to your. I feel like I learned the word skeuomorphism from your talk at Build ETH in San Francisco.
I've been hitting it hard. Yeah.
I learned so much from you, though, man. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for giving us the knowledge. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, and likewise, I learned a lot from everyone here.
It's been a great crew. Yeah, it has.
I
don't know if we have any chats. I think we're ready to go. I think we're moving on. Thank you, Matt Condon. Next up is kind of the last panel. The last story is the kind of going comic booky. We're going ERC 721 origin story, bringing in kind of looking back at that. The GitHub chats when people are saying, should we have this or should we have that? What should the standard look like? We've got a ton of folks with us here. I don't even know if so let me do a small introduction, right? We got Deet, who probably CryptoKitties fame, right? No, I'm not even going to introduce. You guys introduce. Let me just, you guys go. I think Deet, you started this as, what if we go talk to Nick and some of those guys that were here in the early days that were thinking about this and say, did you think this would end up like this? Did you think NFTs were going to explode like this? I'll get out of the way. You guys go. Oh, Jay is here, our moderator. Whew, I thought I was going to have to moderate. Thank you, Jay, also for being here. I'm going to get out of the way and let you guys do introductions. Hearts, hearts, hearts. Origin story. ERC 721 origin story.
Hello. How's everyone doing today?
Doing great.
Good.
Oh.
Yeah, I just had a little problem on my end. Sorry for that. Yeah, we can get started pretty quick here. So I guess the best way to start is maybe we could all introduce ourselves, unless Austin already did that.
No, he hasn't done that yet.
Okay, perfect. Let's go. Yeah, let's just start off right off the bat. Let's go introduce ourselves, what we do now, where we were back in late 2017, how we got involved with NFTs, and is it nifty, nifties? How do you say it? How do you pronounce NFT? You have to. You can't stay neutral on this one.
Sure, I'll go first. Thanks so much for moderating, Jay. Great to meet you in person, or at least live, I should say. I mean, I'm Dieter Shirley. I'm the CTO of Dapper Labs and the chief architect of the Flow blockchain. But of course, I'm here today because I was the creator of EIP 721 that became ERC 721. When Austin reached out to me to talk about the origins of the OG NFT, right, as the topic, I wanted to get these 5 other people talking because I feel like I owe them a debt of gratitude, because before CryptoKitties launched, no one cared about NFTs, but these guys did, and they all jumped in and they commented, and Doug actually created some precursor work, and so I just wanted to make sure that they were here to tell their part of the story of ERC 721, and as Austin intimated, sort of like what they thought in those early days, what this could all mean. And so I think I'll hand intros off to Doug, because he was actually, I think, the first person I reached out to after I posted EIP 721, because I'd seen his previous work with Auction House.
All right, yeah, thanks, Dee. Thanks, Jay, for hosting. I'm Doug Picanics. What I do now is I'm the founder of a video infrastructure streaming protocol in Web3 called LivePeer. And even back when CryptoKitties launched in 2017, I was working on LivePeer at the time. But a year before that, and as Dee mentioned, why I'm here is because I kind of the first project that I built in the Ethereum space was this open protocol, this open application called Auction House, which was this on-chain auction protocol for non-fungible unique goods, or NFUGs, as I call them. And at the time, we knew that this was going to be something super interesting and exciting, and there was going to be a need to exchange these things on-chain that were unique, that were not fungible tokens. But there were no NFTs in existence yet. So what did we do? We created the simplest possible version of something that Nick had been working on forever with ENS and domain names. We created the world's prototype simplest domain name registration to actually have some non-fungible unique goods that could be auctioned through the auction house protocol. We opened up this prototype on, I think, the Morden testnet at the time, and put out a call for feedback, for input on how these things should work. And I'm so glad that everyone here kind of picked up that call to action. And a few months or a year later, we had 721 and the explosion of all the exciting stuff that came from it.
Awesome. I'm just going to remind everyone as we go through the introductions, let's kind of keep this a little more of a tweet length, because I want to get to the discussion.
I guess I'll go next since I was name dropped. I'm Nick Johnson. I was at the time of 721 the lead EIP editor, and also involved with ENS, the Ethereum name service, which made it doubly relevant to me. So I offered some feedback on 721, and also was one of the winners of the bug bounty when CryptoKitties launched, and got myself a very nice special CryptoKitty for that. And I think they're mostly called NFTs, but I've always had a soft spot for the word nifty.
There we go. We have one holdout for nifty.
Well, I guess I go next. My name is Esteban, and at the time in 2017, I was drafting the land contract for the Decentraland, and it never occurred to me until Dieter showed up and said, "Hey, we should standardize this." It was very few of us at the time, and I was super happy to collaborate on that.
I can continue if you want. I'm Jordi Bailina. At that time, I was working a lot in the EIP 777. Was like an extension of the fungible token of the ERC20. But I was collaborating a lot in the EIPs, in the ERC's part. So we're talking a lot in the ENS, well, in the that word, the retrospective. The one that the contract that defines what functions they have, and I don't remember the name. It was retrospective, introspective or something like that. Introspection and all that stuff. So I was collaborating on that side, and just trying to standardize at that point. And right now I'm just in Hermes, just doing scalability things and other not related to NFT things.
And do we want? Oh, go ahead.
I guess that we still need Will, right?
Yeah, I don't know if Will looks frozen. I'm not sure if he's managed to stay connected or not.
Will, if you're able to introduce yourself, do so when you come back on. Otherwise, we are going to move forward. And everyone's had a chance to introduce themselves then?
Yep.
Awesome. Okay. I'm going to open up the discussion. Looking at the official spec, back when it was actually officially defined in EIP 721 for ERC 721, the official spec defines NFTs as A, physical property, houses unique artwork, etc. B, virtual collectibles, unique pictures, kittens, collectibles, cards. C, negative value assets, loans, burdens, and other responsibilities. Is it fair to say that the eventual use cases have differed from the implementation of the standard?
Very much so, I think.
Yeah, go ahead, Nick.
There were a few things people had in mind, but I think some of them people definitely didn't predict, like going way out there, things like Uniswap v3 liquidity tokens, and some things were much less or more important than we thought. I haven't seen any negative value tokens, and I haven't seen many tokens that represent physical things, but NFT art, of course, has become huge.
Do you think we'll start to see those physicalities? I mean, it seems fairly hard to build those incentives.
Yeah, it's something I've played around with a little bit before, and the really big problem is keeping the physical object tied to the NFT so that whoever acquires the physical object can always claim the NFT. And there are ways around that that are sort of akin to a hardware wallet that's sort of super glued into the object, but none of them are easy, and I don't think anyone's come up with a solution, which is a bit of a barrier. But also just digital collectibles and so on are much easier to create and distribute than physical objects.
Will, you're back. Did you want to give us a quick introduction of yourself if you're not frozen? And pick NFTs, Nifties, or how do you pronounce it?
I definitely lean towards NFTs. Yeah, sorry about the connection issue. Yeah, so I work on a project called 0x Protocol, and basically our vision, our kind of thesis is that all forms of value are going to end up represented as tokens on public blockchains, whether it's fiat currency, stocks, bonds, all the way to like digital goods like video game items, collectibles, airline miles, everything. And back in 2017, we had just launched the first version of the protocol, and we had started to see some interesting new projects emerging that were like CryptoPunks and stuff, where they were essentially trying to create NFTs, but there wasn't really a standard that existed. But we really wanted to support these types of items because it seemed like there were a lot of interesting use cases for them. And so that's how we got sucked into the EIP 721 conversation. And yeah, we're excitedly following along as the conversation progressed.
I guess jumping off that as a general question, early NFT designs were almost basically just ERC20s that use the ID that you had to sort of find some sort of rareness. Was it intentional to divert from that way? Because with a Mooncat, you have to wrap it. And I'm not sure how ethereal works, but those are all pre-721.
Yeah, I mean, this ERC20 was the impetus, right? Like, it was ICO season. Everybody and their dog was raising millions of dollars selling ERC20s, and so whenever we talk about internally, we talk about the CryptoKitties project that we were working on. Inevitably, the business people would ask if they were ERC20 compatible. And as an engineer, I got very frustrated by this. I would be like, I would rant about the difference between fungibility and non-fungibility, and how the whole point of these kitties was that each one is going to be unique, and ERC20 is like, it makes it virtually impossible to keep track of that, et cetera, et cetera. And so one day I realized that was the impetus of creating 721, was it's just like, well, stop, leave me alone. Right? Here's a standard for non-fungible things.
And we'll get into a little bit more later, possibly for the differences of ERCs, but it is interesting because you could make a new spec, and there's new specs made all the time for tokens, but if they're not widely adopted, it kind of runs the risk of just being sort of siloed off in illiquidity, which is a huge risk for ERC 721 at the time.
Yeah, no, and it's one of the reasons why I was so grateful to these folks, right? Because we had no idea that CK was going to be successful, and so having somebody who was willing to help with that while it was still something new was really important. The funny coda from that is that because 100 people showed up to contribute to ERC 721 after CryptoKitties. Obviously, it ended up a much stronger standard because of it. But it also means that CryptoKitties is not actually properly ERC 721 compatible.
Okay, well, jumping on, just adding a little bit to that prehistory. So some of you were involved with some early projects, right? So we were just talking about a little bit of prehistory, but Decentraland before Ethereum, it was on a fork of Bitcoin called Namecoin. Did you want to talk a little bit about that?
Well, it was similar to Namecoin. I think that Namecoin was kind of like the first digital scarcity on a blockchain in the shape of an NFT. And with Decentraland before Ethereum, we did the same. We used the UTXOs to represent non-fungible tokens, but it was super early. I think that it's funny because we never at the time we didn't realize it was like a generalized thing that we could. Not even with ENS, right, Nick? You also didn't realize that ENS could make for really cool NFTs.
Yeah, I mean, in my defense, ENS was deployed before 721, but even as I was commenting on the 721 spec, it didn't really initially occur to me that, oh, hey, this thing I'm dedicating like basically all of my time to is also an NFT. You know, that took a while longer.
Yeah, RareAF were at the time also the number one non-fungible thing. It was on another blockchain as well, I think. And you were involved with Ethereum, right? Back in the day?
Me?
Yeah. Oh, maybe I got that wrong.
If I was, I've forgotten.
Okay, cool.
On some more prehistory. So we're kind of talking about ENS, and the namespace was kind of happening in parallel to ERC 721. You know, and Jordi was talking a little bit about his involvement with ERC 777. There was also Auction House, and even, you know, and on another chain there was RareAF. Was there any sort of highlights that anyone wants to sort of jump on and mention before we kind of move the conversation forward?
I think that RareAF were more like 1155. Oh, sorry, Doug.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to mention that. No, that RareAF at the time were more like 1155. There were multiple issues of one RareAF, so it wasn't quite the same, like, I don't know, simplicity that I liked from 721. That's just.
And for those who don't know, ERC 1155 is another spec that is also well enough used. Some platforms support it. It kind of bridges the gap between ERC 20 and ERC 721. So it's sort of semi-non-fungible.
Yeah, the other point I was going to bring up just about kind of the prehistory phase was that you know, everyone in the NFT community owes, you know, a bunch of people on this call a huge debt of gratitude for the standards work that went into kind of creating 721 and agreeing upon it. I mean, without that, you know, in Auction House, for example, there was really just two functions that were applicable to NFTs. There was, you know, the owner function to identify who owned this asset, and the set owner function to change it. And it really takes kind of the whole community and all these different use cases, be it CryptoKitties, Decentraland, ENS, all giving input on what's important to create the right safety mechanisms, the right events to make a good developer experience, anticipating future use cases. So a lot of times the standards work goes really unheralded, but it really becomes a solid base that everyone can build on top of. And, you know, I think that was a really important step that everyone took.
So then coming kind of back to now, how would, you know, let's pick three people. How would you define NFTs to an engineer, business engineer, or someone new to the space? Tweet length. Who wants to take it? One tweet.
I'm a technical communicator, and I still don't want to do that in a tweet.
But well, what's funny is that I have such trouble with this question, and maybe we can go around and talk about why none of us want to do it. But the reason I have trouble with this question is because, like, what 721 was trying to do and what people call NFTs now, there's the 721 is broader, right? And you brought it up earlier, Jay, and Will touched on it as well. This idea that, you know, we could use it as, you know, a deed to a real world good. And what the current mindset of NFT is very much in the digital collectible art, right? You know, obviously, you know, NBA Top Shots, we in a sense, right, we've taken a step back, right? CryptoKitties were one of the things that was interesting about CryptoKitties is that there was something you could do with them, right? The breeding game. And what we're seeing is that a lot of people, just that notion of fashion or art or self-expression that comes from just being like, hey, I can express myself by owning these things. That's actually enough to do a lot of stuff with. I hope that's not the end of NFTs, though. I hope we get to do a lot more of the interesting stuff that people have been talking about. I kind of want to hand it off to Will here, because he was talking about the vision of like everything being on chain, and I'm curious how much you've thought about that in the problems of syncing up, as Nick was saying, syncing up physical ownership with NFT ownership, and what would hold precedence, and how that might work.
Sure. So yeah, just to make sure I'm understanding. So the question is, in a world where like physical items or assets are represented as, or ownership over those physical items is represented as like a non-fungible token or something on a public blockchain, how is that relationship enforced? Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm just wondering if you see any moves towards that, right? Because I think it's easy to imagine that it should exist, but as engineers, it's easy for us to see like why it doesn't exist, because it's so hard. And I'm wondering if you're seeing any movement in that direction, or if you have any ideas of how that might work.
Yeah, there are a few interesting projects in the past that have worked on more or less like providing a way to custody assets that exist outside of the blockchain world and represent them as tokens in the blockchain world. Not specifically items that are non-fungible, but for example, like what is now called like trust token. Their initial kind of idea was, how do we take assets, put them into a legal trust in an enforceable way, and then issue a digital representation of those assets that are sitting in a legal trust on a blockchain, and set it up in a way where, there's like a third-party custodian, and, they'll redeem these digital assets for the physical assets that are owned in that legal trust. And I think their approach right now is they're doing this for like fiat currencies. And so similar to like USDC, for example. And there have also been some like attempts to tokenize like real estate. But I think like the early attempts to tokenize real estate it's been challenging for them to find usage, because just because a token, like a real estate token, is on the blockchain, it doesn't mean like blockchain users are like experts in real estate. And so you have no idea if like buying a piece of this house makes any sense just because it's a token. Like, is it actually a good deal or not? Which is kind of ironic, because people will put hundreds of thousands of dollars into like NFTs that have, arbitrary value. But yeah. Definitely a lot of room for the space to progress.
I'll reluctantly have a go at the original question, if that's still on the table.
Please, yes.
I think that ultimately NFTs represent ownership, and what that represents can depend on the particular project. And it's usually easier to explain with an example. Like in the physical world, I might buy a limited run print of 1 of 25 from an artist, and they number them in the corner, and I have fair assurance that it's limited because the artist's reputation's riding on that. And NFTs allow them to do something similar with digital art, which normally is unlimited, and then I can sell my limited print to someone else if I wish. I think that sort of thing encapsulates NFT ownership.
Okay, so I guess it would be fair to say that anything that needs to be defined more in finite, something that has to be finite, then that is, ERC20 doesn't.
Digitality would be the 2-word version, I guess.
Yeah, because fungibility versus non-fungibility, it's generally yes, but not exclusively.
I'll take another stab at it. An NFT is a certificate of authenticity issued by the author of some virtual good that you want to keep scarce. Scarcity is the most important part because, in general, everything digital GIFs or PNGs or whatever, they can be copied as many times as you like, and an NFT gives you some sort of link to the original owner that can prove that you have like some virtual asset. I don't know.
Yeah, I would like to just to point the similarity between fungible and non-fungible tokens, that at the end is the social contract. We accept fungible tokens because, or even we accept real money, just a piece of paper. Why we accept that this is $50 or whatever, and we accept that? Well, because there is a social contract. People really accept that. It can be the social contract forced by a law, or it can be just because we accept that. And NFTs is a little bit the same. NFTs, they have all the properties that registry and other things and can be transferred. It has a lot of very good technical properties, but at the end is the acceptance. The acceptance that why the people accept that the owner of this NFT is actually the real owner of the physical object. At the moment that there is more people that accept that a given NFT is matched with the physical object, when there is this social acceptance, then is when the NFT has the value. The interesting thing here is, because you mentioned the legal part, I agree. So probably the most innovative things about NFTs is the legality that's behind and that's trying to rise right now. But CryptoKitties, they were nothing legal there. It just people just accept, the community just accept that the owner of this piece of CryptoKitty just belonged to the person, and there was an acceptance, and you can show to your friends. And there was something that were beyond the legality. But it's just a proof that when there is a community that accepts the NFTs as the ownership, as the real ownership that's behind, is when it starts having value and becomes having interest.
So we're lucky ultimately that the spec gained legitimacy within art enough for social pressures to maintain its definition.
Yeah, we need to see that. So if people accepts NFTs, then you get all the good things of NFTs. You can sell it, you can do auctions, you can work in NFTs. So, and then is when it really becomes the value and accepting. I think that people in general have an incentive to accept that because of the properties of the blockchain itself. So this is something that we will see more in the future, because there is an interest for people to accept that. So the social contract, something that's very difficult to understand at the beginning. Why I need to trust that the person, this is just a digital, it's just a number, it's a digital asset. But at the moment that you accept that, and the moment that there is a community, and there is a society that accepts that, then the value is when just exponentially grows.
I mean, value is fundamentally a human construct, right? And nothing can have value unless we agree it. And I just think, the first thing that blockchains did, right, was they created a Schelling point for value. And obviously, with money-like things that came first. But the reality is that, there is no word in English for non-fungible, right? There's fungible and you can negate it, but that's because almost everything is non-fungible. And so just, I mean, it's funny, like, what is an NFT? It's a thing you can own, right? Like, that's literally the definition of an NFT. It's a thing you can own. And like, well, what can you do it? Well, you can stop owning it, right? You can give it to somebody else, but that's, in a sense, that's all it is. But when you think about what a token is, ERC20 or even Bitcoin, well, what is that? Well, it's just a thing you can own. And you can own part of it and you can own a bunch of them. But like at the end of the day, the real importance of it comes from the importance that we as humans give it.
Yeah, I think that was really helpful. Those are a lot of things that I think a lot of people think about. And you know, to your point, bringing it back to like, what is blockchain? Well, it is ultimately, as you said, it's a Schelling point for universal value. You just need to have, and it's really good at finding a mechanism to corral people around certain things. And these various sinks of value ultimately all kind of come down to ETH itself, and you know, and it really deconstructs our notions of what we think of as value, because we've been so far removed from what value is to what monetary value is. And so that's kind of one of the things that keeps bringing you back, that I think is always really interesting. Okay, so we were talking a little bit about the future. Let's kind of get back on that. So before the advent of marketplaces, you know, there was stuff like Auction House, then OpenSea. Did anyone really have an idea of what an NFT exchange might look like? Something similar to D-Markets? And then on that, you know, did anyone foresee the trend of fractionalization, like B20 indexes, you know, indexes NFTX, and, you know, how does that change the value? So it's kind of a broader discussion point.
Well, back in the day, we all had to create our own marketplaces, right? Together with CryptoKitties, we did that with the Decentraland. Will had an early version of a general NFT marketplace, but also CryptoPunks, they also had to make their own marketplaces. It was all very custom made back in the day.
Yeah, even Mooncats, like they have their own little marketplace built in, because there wasn't enough legitimacy around any one particular marketplace. And now we're starting to see, you know, marketplaces themselves start to fraction off into various other forms.
And I think the fact that that metadata was an optional part of 721 reflects people's expectations around that, you know, this might be useful for some things, but the expectation was largely that like the sites interacting with the NFT would already know, you know, how to fit like implementation specific details, and therefore that would be specific marketplaces and so on. And I'm sure no one would have ruled out things like OpenSea, but I think the expectation was more that, yeah, you build an NFT and you build a way to trade them as well.
One of the actually, so one of the coolest features, so we built in support for just plain vanilla ERC 721 trades into 0x protocol, but my teammate Michael built like probably like one of the coolest things that I think we've ever built into the protocol, and it was the ability for someone to trade any arbitrary NFT that met that had a specific set of properties. And so one of the issues with NFTs are that the lack of fungibility makes these markets extremely inefficient and not, you know, it eliminates, it makes them not liquid. Fungibility is the equivalence of you know, liquidity. And with some, you know, if you think about like, oh, I want to buy like a house, there are so many different like properties associated with that house. How many bedrooms, how many bathrooms, how much square footage, when was it built? Like all of these are different parameters that you have to that you can filter by. But what was really cool with this system that my teammate built into the third version of 0x is someone could say, I will buy any CryptoKitty that has these on-chain properties for this price. And what that does is it creates a very liquid market for different types of NFTs that have different sets of properties. And I thought like I still kind of think that that's like the future of NFT marketplaces, that like people will like reduce the number of dimensions that go into pricing an asset into like the most important ones. Like, yeah, for example, like how many parcels are on like a Decentraland? How many, like, you know, what is the square footage of this Decentraland parcel, for example? Like,
it kind of feels like that's the order book equivalent of like an NFT index's liquidity pool. You know, so it's a similar idea where you say this pool will accept anything that meets these requirements, and you can put one in and take one out, and so forth.
Yeah, I was really surprised by the. Sorry, go ahead, Jordy.
Go, please.
Well, I was just really surprised by how, and obviously it's because of exactly what Will said about liquidity and the friction involved in trying to find things. But I was really surprised at how quickly people went from like non-fungible to like, well, how do we make this fungible? How do we make this more fungible, right? You know, one of my favorite projects that came out of the work that the community did on top of CryptoKitties is Wrapped Kitties. Which is literally just a smart contract, and anybody can put a kitty in there, and then you get a fungible token, and that's an ERC20 token that you can trade however you want, and you can then burn that token to get a random kitty out. And I think that's a really interesting idea. And yeah, and I know the community. I don't know if it ever actually got built, but the community looked at the idea of creating like different tiers of those and saying like, well, what if we did wrapped Gen 0 kitties, or what if we did wrapped, you know, kitties with the, you know, a fast cooldown or something like that. And so you could have sort of different tiers. And I think it's very interesting. And I mean, part of what's fun about it is that you can slice it in all these different ways. And hopefully we can find a way for people to set up markets that let them, you know, sort of decide what's important to them.
Yeah, I think with everything in smart contract land, kind of the least inspiring, least interesting thing is starting by just mapping physical world or Web 2 world onto this. So like, how do we recreate eBay for NFTs, or how do we have this NFT represent, you know, a physical baseball card or something is where it begins. But then when you recognize, well, these are actually digital goods, they're kind of native to the internet, if you will, you can talk about these, you know, associating these kind of liquidity properties to them. You can talk about fractional ownership. You can talk about embedding economics on transfer. You can, you know, you can really think about how that changes things, and the type of experimentation that you just, you know, described that took place on early CryptoKitties is, again, just the beginning, and there's probably, you know, so much more to come.
Yeah, using NFTs as collateral for, you know, for borrowing platform, or you know, another ERC20 generation, it's one option. Also the you know, borrowing NFTs, you know, just all these you know, internet of, well, the world of just lending objects and exploiting objects. No? They have an NFT that's an apartment, and then you get the rights. You can sell the rights of renting this apartment. You know, it's like you can do lots of things. Insurance on top of that. It's like it's when you start thinking. At the end is when you put the objects in a smart contract platform, and you put the world in a smart contract platform is when, well, just a full set of contracts can rise, and imagination is free. It's like a lot of things you can do.
Yes, indeed. I remember back in the day there was a lot of discussion about like the gas fees, and there were some people that wanted to do boxing and unboxing of NFTs, like NFTs that can own other NFTs, and I don't know. Like I think that we did some of that with the Decentraland with the states. It's kind of like an NFT that can own other NFTs. But the gas prices for managing a lot of land together were going to be super expensive. So we try to do that as soon as possible, so that we will become like good citizens of Ethereum. But yeah, I think that also there was a tool by 0x to do that, like boxing a lot of NFTs together. It was, yeah, because after CryptoKitties with the clogging of the network, it was super important for everyone to realize that, yeah, this gas stuff is going to be important.
So it looks like we have about a few minutes left. So I'm going to leave with the last question being, is there a concern for the file store for NFT assets? What does the present and future look like for decentralized storage of the underlying JPEG, for example? So quick answer, couple minutes. Is there a quick answer?
I think it's a valid criticism and concern. A lot of stuff is hosted on centralized services, and fortunately, though, the metadata system and so on permits something like automated archiving, and I would love to see a web.archive.org type project that just aims to archive all NFTs, because if you can do that, you can preserve them for all time and you can ensure they keep working.
I think that at the end, data availability is going to be a reality very soon in the blockchains. Ethereum 2.0 mainly is going to be a data availability platform. Filecoin is already a data availability platform. So, well, maybe now is problematic, but I think that in the mid-future, I don't know, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, putting a lot of data on chain, I don't know which chain, but putting a lot of that on chain is going to be a reality. This is part of the scaling strategy that is there. So to have the roll-ups stuff, that's one thing. But the other thing is the data availability, and data availability is in the way of being solved.
Yeah, and I think there's a distinction between data that it makes sense for smart contracts to have access to, right? So Will's point about being able to put a bid on a particular CryptoKitty with a particular gene, that's only possible because the genes were on chain. If we had stored the genetic information in a Filecoin like solution, then there would have been no way for the smart contract to do that. On the other hand, there's no reason for like something like a Top Shot that literally has a video. Putting that on chain, there's no one's going to write a smart contract that goes and tries to figure out whether the fifth frame of that video actually contains the player it claims to, right? And so I think that there's going to be, we need to have more data that is processable on chain, and then we need to have a robust and easy to use way for people to put the data in decentralized storage, because I know that I don't think anyone's opposed to it, right? Like NBA has even told us that they don't mind doing it. It's just it's a lot of work right now, and it's traditionally not been a thing that has impacted the people's acceptance of the platform, and so it's something that we're definitely looking into and we want to move towards. But it's a matter of getting these tools to be mature, and then I think we'll get there.
On a final note, did we expect the CryptoKitties spam that spam the network end up being what it was now? I mean, it's a few years since then.
It wasn't spam.
I didn't think it was spam.
Thanks,
I didn't think it was spam. I thought it was innovation.
We had 3 meetings, each of which the topic was, what do we do if not enough people use this? And we didn't have a single meeting about what if too many people use this. So certainly we didn't expect it.
Perfect. Well, thank you all for joining me. And I think Jonathan is going to jump on. Hey, Jonathan, man.
Hello. Hi, everyone.
Hey there.
Thanks so much. That was great. Thank you all for making it possible for us to even be having this conference today. Without you all, we literally would not be here. So this is the end of the day, and I have a song that I've prepared for everybody. It is my song of the day, and I want to share it with you. First, I just want to give a huge thanks. If you're watching this, just start clapping for Jonathan Palmer, who's been running this behind the scenes, Simona, Austin, everyone who's put this all together. It's been a really great conference, actually. I've been really enjoyed it. So, you know, we're all here going, woo, yeah. Really quickly, I also just want to acknowledge this is very strange to be closing this thing out right while the Chauvin trial is finishing, and we're any minute going to get that verdict. So I just want to acknowledge that that is happening on Twitter and in the world, and it's a very important thing. And to be here about to share this very silly song with you feels a little strange. So I just want to acknowledge that to make the strangeness maybe a little bit less. But anyway, so my song for today is song a day number 4,493. If you don't know me, I've been writing a song a day since January 1st of 2009. And I recently sold the first 365 of them on OpenSea. And that's a project that I'd been working on since 2017. And to some of the points that they were talking about in the last thing, you know, I wasn't able to do that until the marketplace, the OpenSea, was sort of mature enough for me able to use it, because I can't code or anything. It was hard to find Solidity devs. It was hard to put it together myself. So anyway, that's a whole other thing. So for today's song, Simona asked me to make a song about NFT history, which was fortuitous because I actually was already sort of planning on doing it. And the first thought I had was to make like a We Didn't Start the Fire style song, like going through actual, like, you know, from the very beginning. But it's a little too early for that. And it's difficult because the real thing is there's a lot of, it's a very contentious question about like NFT history, even though it's all here on chain. You know, if you ask people what the first NFT is, if you ask like 10 people, you might get 10 different answers. And so I especially took some inspiration from Joe Looney, who's dearly missed today, who created the RareAF wallet, and how angry he's been on Twitter. I mean, Joe Looney's, you know, his part of his thing is being sort of angry, and that's why we love him. And on Twitter, though, he's been so upset that Christie's, when they announced Larva Labs' big upcoming auction for the CryptoPunks, like Christie's just basically wrote off everything that happened pre-punks in their description of Larva Labs. They're like, Larva Labs are the first ever. No one thought of this before Matt and John decided to do this. And Joe's just sitting there seething, right? So that's the impetus for this song. It's called Who's the God of the Nifty Church? Parentheses, NFT history in song. Thank you all so much for coming, and let's roll the tape. Here's how we're gonna go out.
Who's the first? Who's the first? Who's the God of the Nifty Church? Who said now let there be digital scarcity? Was it punks because they're now by far the most valuable? Some cost more than a large house. Celebrities buy them to flex their wealth. Who's the first? Who's the first? Who's the God of the Nifty Church? Who said now let there be digital scarcity? Was it this little green frog? All the versions made by lots of folks on colored token blocks. Sold, traded, also bought. Who's the first? Who's the first? Who's the God of the Nifty Church? Who said now let there be digital scarcity? Was it these hexagons floating in space, the great beyond? Right when Ethereum was turned on, was this the nifty dawn? First, who's the God of the Nifty Church? Who said now let there be digital scarcity? Was it ASCII, Bernanke, color coins, cryptographics, Kevin McCoy, Anil Dash, when they launched Monograph? Maybe you have got to go all the way back to Nakamoto, or this post from '93, which in great detail describes NFTs. Who's the first? Who's the first? Who's the God of the Nifty Church? Who said now let there be digital scarcity? Who's the first? Who's the first?